Welcome to the Vintage Ballers podcast. I'm your host, Brad Coreno, and on today's episode, we have Ty Mopkins joining the show. Ty is a creative designer and brand consultant out of Detroit, Michigan, who has worked with and created some of the most iconic collaborations with Nike, Adidas, Reebok, Fila, and New Era Cap Company. So without further ado, please welcome Ty Mopkins. Funny because I'm an Ohio State fan, so I get a lot of flack from you Michigan boys, and of course this year you guys got us, and that was a heck of a game. But
Finally.
No, I know. It's funny when it comes to Michigan, Ohio State, Ty. Like I'm one of the Ohio State fans that I respect Michigan. You guys, when I grew up, you guys beat us pretty good for quite a while there, especially during the Cooper years. So, it's one of those things where it's never really been it's been so lopsided both ways for the last like 30 years. I kind of want to go back to the days where it is back and forth. It's more fun that way.
It's fun that way, yeah, because now, to be honest with you, it's not really a rivalry no more. You guys own us, and it's just like, Michigan, Ohio, if Michigan, Ohio State is good, it's good for college football.
I totally agree. It's like Duke, Carolina. Yep.
Yes. And now, if you notice, that kind of lost a little steam. So
it did. Yep.
It's kind of like you got Duke, Carolina, Michigan, Ohio State, Yankees, Red Sox.
Yep. Absolutely.
So you need these to go Dodgers, Giants. So it's like you need these to coexist just for the fun of sports.
You do. And I feel like we lost some of that in baseball's kind of, that's a whole different story, especially yesterday what happened with Barry Bonds and everything. But, I feel baseball's lost some of its luster, unfortunately. And it just, a lot of the fan base, I feel like it's kind of dwindling. The NBA and NFL are getting more popular and MLB is not. And I'm a big baseball guy too, but it's unfortunate what's happened. And, that, again, that's a whole different conversation we can go down.
No, it is. It is, because to be honest with you, baseball is my first love.
I love baseball. I'm the same way. I grew up in the 90s with the Indians here when they had, Manny and Tomey and Bell and Lofton, and we were loaded. And then, of course, you guys had some great team back in the 80s when I was born. I know you guys won it in 84 with Trammell and those guys and Lou Whitaker and those boys. So, baseball was definitely, I loved it. And I mean, we haven't won one since 48 here. And now you have people angry about the name change. It's a mess here when it comes to baseball. The name change, I mean, I can understand why people, of course, like you're loyal to that name, and you've been, I've been rooting for the Indians for, my whole life, for 38 years. So of course it's something that I personally always loved the Indians, but I understand why people, there's certain people that didn't like the name. And I know that's where we're going in that direction where there's going to be name changes and things like that. So I accept the Guardians. That's fine. I don't like it as much as the Indians because I grew up with the Indians and I have that love for that team, but.
So yes. Well, what is the background with the Guardians? Where did they get the name from?
So there's these, I guess you can call them, not statues, but they're these, I don't even know what you would call them. You'll see when you're in Cleveland. They're
okay.
One of the bridges has these big sculptures of what essentially is guardians of the city. They look like guardians. So that's how they came up with the name of those. But it's funny because no one had said that name. I never even heard that name until they announced the name change. And I was like, wow, Guardians. So I think it'll grow on people like anything always does. But I think like when you look at the NBA, people still love the Washington Bullets, even though they're the Wizards for 20 some years. People want to go back to the Bullets. It's that, it's that sentimental aspect of anything in life, I think. And we get that way in Cleveland. Ty, we lost the Browns for 3 years. They moved away and then LeBron left twice. So every team, we're used to losing things. And I think the fans are so sick of it at this point. We're just like, and even though I understand some of the, why they did it to some degree, I think a lot of the fans look at them, it's just like another thing we have to go through now, in their eyes. So.
Yeah, because it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to watch Major League now and not, know that it's still, I'm talking about the movie Major League. And, it's just so much iconic stuff. But like you said, I understand. I understand. Just like with the Redskins, I understand. But you got Super Bowl victories there. So it's like, how do you, it's hard. It's just hard.
It is. And I feel bad for the players, especially the Redskins, the guys that played on that team, Biner and Rippon and all those guys and Art Monk who won those Super Bowls. And then they can't really, I mean, you can still say the name because it's part of history, but at the same time, it's a weird thing now that's come up, and especially that it's the Washington football team, and what I know they're going to change their names soon here,
right?
But
right.
It's got to be weird for those guys who played for the Redskins, and you really can't say that now. So, but Ty, I wanted to get back. I want to take it back to your youth. And obviously, you grew up in Detroit. You're a Detroit guy through and through. I love
Right.
looking at your posts because you, just like with me with Cleveland, you rep Detroit hard. And I love that. So even when I lived out in Los Angeles, I was wearing my Tribe hat, my, my Cavs, my Buckeyes, my Browns. So with you, growing up in Detroit, when did you fall in love with sports and who were your favorite athletes and teams?
Well, it first started with me. Like I said earlier, baseball was always my first love. So I was 5 and 6 years old going to the old Tiger Stadium and watching, like you say, Lou Whitaker and Alan Trammell. To me, which, like how we talked about the Hall of Fame, I still think it's a tragedy that Lou Whitaker is not in the Hall of Fame, because between Whitaker and Trammell, those are still the two best second base and shortstop combo to ever play the game. And yeah, so I grew up, my father, God rest his soul, he used to take me to all the Tiger games. So when you go to Tiger Stadium, it's a Pacific area at Tiger Stadium you want to sit at, and it's the bleachers. So they will call us the bleacher creatures, because it was just pretty much how, have you been to Wrigley Field before?
No, I have. I've been outside of Wrigley, but not inside.
Okay, so it's like them with the bleachers there at Wrigley. It's like the place to be. So we used to always go there, and you like me. So you remember when we used to have twilight doubleheaders?
Oh yeah.
Where sometimes the games didn't end at midnight, 1 o'clock, where it was like you started at 7, as soon as that game was over, 15-minute break, and you played again. So I fell in love with baseball with the 70 Tigers, when we had Alan Trammell, Lou Whitaker, Kirk Gibson, Lance Parrish, Jack Morris, Sparky Anderson was the manager.
Love Sparky, yep.
Oh yeah, so I grew up with that. And baseball, like I said, baseball was always my favorite sport, still is to this day. So I still go to Comerica Park now. I mean, I hate that baseball stadiums have become more corporate now, and it's just not that fanfare. That's why I try to go to at least 2 Cub games a year in Chicago, because they still have that organic baseball stadium for the fans, that and Fenway Park. So those are my 2 favorite ballparks to go to, besides if I'm not, at Comerica Park.
I love it. And I agree with you, Ty. Like, comparing old Tiger Stadium to Comerica, I know obviously there's a lot of newer things in Comerica, but as far as like what did you like better? What did you prefer?
Well, I prefer Tiger Stadium just because of the closeness. You remember the older baseball stadiums was stacked on top of each other, so it was like you wasn't spread it out. Now these new stadiums are more spread it out, and people are not really sociable at these stadiums like how it was, when I came up, when I was going to Tiger Stadium, and even with you guys, I remember going to a couple of Cleveland Indian games in the 80s. And I think the name of your stadium was, what was it called? Municipal Stadium?
Yep, Municipal Stadium, exactly.
Yeah.
Cleveland Municipal. And that's where the Browns and Indians played.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it just had that feel to it. It had that, the smell of real hot dogs.
Yes.
Where the guy used to walk around with the big cart on his shoulder. He had the steamer.
Yep.
And he'd take the stick and slop the mustard on there and things like that. So it's just like, the experience is not there no more. Now you can buy sushi at a baseball game. It's like,
you're right. It is.
I love sushi, but I don't want it at the baseball game. That's and a pop or a beer.
I'm totally with you on that. It's gotten very corporate-y. And me and my dad had season tickets for the Browns and Indians for many years back in those days. So I would go to the 90s Indians, and then the Browns were back then. People forget how good the Browns were before they left. They were great for many, many years. So we went back in the late 80s, early 90s. We had Bernie Kosar, and I had actually Eric Metcalf on this podcast, and Reggie Langhorne, those guys.
Oh,
so
wow.
My dad's friends with Reggie Langhorne, so he got me Metcalf on here, and it was great to talk to those guys. And the dog pound, that was the real dog pound back then. I mean, it was I had opposing players that would say, when they came in, people were throwing batteries at you. I mean, it was just like Detroit. People are nuts in Cleveland. It's a Midwest thing, but it's, people take their sports seriously here. So I missed that old stadium. It's not as nice as the new one, of course, but I missed that feel. It was real football. It was just a different. And Ty, I actually went to the last ever Indians game at Municipal Stadium. I think I was about 10 years old then, and my uncle took us, me and my cousins. It was great. Sold out, 78,000 people. I still have my shirt, my little T-shirt I got. So yeah, it was 93. And it was, I miss it. I really do.
No. I understand. And it's just everything is just too corporate to now. It's like the fan experience is totally gone. Even the way we used to vote for all-star games. I used to be so happy just to go get the ballots.
Yes, I love those. Yep.
And And, you know, growing up, I came up on waking up, getting my chores done on Saturday, hopefully get it done by noon so I can go watch This Week in Baseball.
Yes.
You know, going to get the packs of bubble gum. I mean, the trading cards with the
Love
stale
those
bubble.
little pink bubble gum. Yep.
Yeah, it was stale, but it's
Yeah.
still the thrill of opening up, wishing I get all the Tigers.
It's
But for
funny.
but for some reason, I will always get Matt Barker from the Indians.
Really?
The pitcher
Len Barker, yeah, through the no-hitter. Yep. Early 80s. That's funny.
Or Joe Thornton.
Yep. Yeah, Thornton, yeah. Andre Thornton. Yep. All those guys.
So I would get those guys. I'm like,
so
I gotta go ahead.
It's funny you talk about the Tigers because back in the 90s, they weren't as good when we never really, like back in the 80s, you guys would kill us. And then the 90s, it kind of flip-flopped and the Tigers weren't as good. And then, of course, you had, you know, Cabrera. You got all these, you know, Verlander, Cabrera. You loaded up in the pitchers. I mean, when in 2014, how did you guys not win it that year with all the pitching you had? And you still had a ton of hitting with JD Martinez, I think was still there. And, of course, Victor. And to me, I thought you guys had him. I'm like, these guys are going to win it this year. No doubt about it. And
because when we went in 2008, it was more of a, I'm not going to say fluke, but it was unexpected when we went with that team. But like you said, 2014, we was loaded. We had a Hall of Fame pitching staff.
Oh, Scherzer. I mean, you guys were loaded. Absolutely loaded.
Had
David Price was on the team, wasn't it? Yep.
Yeah. So we had it was disappointing because maybe I think they took the Giants for granted. No. We lost to the Cardinals. So we kind of took them for granted because they was the underdogs. So with that team, they cruised the whole year. So we just knew we automatically had it in the bag. And it still hurts because, like you said, between 2005 and 2015, for that 10-year stretch, we was competitive. We went to 2 World Series, went to a lot of division finals. I mean, went to a lot of AL division finals, and it was a fun time. Now we miss it now.
Yeah, that's how we feel here too. Yeah, we went to 3 World Series in the last 20 some years, and of course lost 2 Game 7 World Series in extra innings, 2 extra inning games. It was heartbreaking. The Marlins and the Cubs. I mean, it just, there's nothing more heartbreaking in baseball than going to Game 7. You're at home in one of them, extra innings, and you lose. It's devastating. So
was you at that game?
No, I wasn't. I wish I was. I had a couple of friends that were there, and there was a lot of Cubs fans there because Cleveland fans had sold their tickets because their Cubs fans are paying like triple the price. And they were giving them like $5,000 for a ticket that was like, you know, $1,000. So people are just giving away so it looked like there was probably a third Cubs fans there when really it was a lot of Cleveland fans that had sold their tickets. And there was a lot of Cleveland fans mad about that, you know, at other Cleveland fans. But I don't blame them. If you have, you know, if you have $1,000 ticket and someone's gonna give you $5-10 grand for it, I get it. I totally get it. You know.
And I can watch it at the bar.
Exactly. So, but yeah, it was that was just a devastating game. And you know, we've had that multiple times, of course, with all of our sports here in Cleveland, with Elway in the '80s with the Browns, and then of course the Browns moving, and then of course, you know, the Jordan killed us with the Cavs. I mean, he would just destroy us all the time in the shot, and so we've had a lot of heartbreak here, and we can relate to Detroit in that way with some of your sports recently, you know, especially with the Lions and Tigers, and it could be heartbreaking. You know, at least the Pistons, though, you guys got your three championships in the last 30 years, and you know, but I was going to ask you about that too. I want to take it back to your youth with Isaiah and those boys and the Bad Boys, because I grew up with them. I was a little kid then, and my brother is a huge basketball fan and was a good basketball player himself. And that was one of our favorite teams to watch was the Bad Boys. Uh-huh. Did you know something was brewing? You know, when Isaiah first got there, what, 82, I think 83, somewhere around there. And then, of course, you guys started putting the pieces together. When did you realize that team was going to be special?
When we drafted, this may sound weird, when we drafted Sally and Rodman. And we saw maybe like halfway through the year how much they played a role, and it kind of energized the other guys that was there, like James Edwards and Lambeer and even Rick Mahorn. So it gave us, a lot of people don't understand. I mean, a lot of people don't know that they was pretty much declining, like in age almost, before Sally and Rodman came there. And it gave them a boost, and it gave them like that extra 4 or 5 year run that you have now, because of course you had Isaiah. Isaiah was still young. Dumars was still young, but you had Mahorn, you had James Edwards, who'd been around the league a couple of times. You had Vinnie Johnson, who had just came from, I think it was Seattle we got him from. And Lambeer, we got him from the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yep.
And we had Kent Benson too, that from the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Is it Mark Aguirre on that team too?
Yep, yep. So we traded Dantley for Mark
That's
McGwire.
right. That's right.
Mark
Yep.
McGwire. So I felt we could have won it with AD, but AD wanted to be the man, and that never was going to happen here.
Not with Isaiah. Nope.
No. And if you had a choice, 9 times out of 10, you're going to take Isaiah.
No question. Yeah. No disrespect to AD, but no, Isaiah was. Ty, I always say, and I see you post this on your page sometime, Isaiah gets kind of forgotten about in the point guard conversation. Unfortunately, it's really unfortunate. And I watched him growing up. I know how good he was. You know, he played against the Cavs, and Mark Price always said Isaiah. I mean, you know, those guys had some good battles back and forth. Isaiah and Mark Price, and Isaiah loves Mark Price as well. They actually have a very deep respect for each other. But you know, those are two of the most underrated point guards to me in NBA history, and especially Isaiah. Isaiah is iconic in many ways, and it's unfortunate what happened. We know the whole Jordan story and Dream Team. We won't get into all that, but it's just, you know. Do you think, you know, where do you put him in the point guard conversation? I mean, obviously, you know, Steph is the greatest shooter of all time. Magic, in my opinion, is the greatest passing point guard. But Isaiah just, I mean, when he, you know, sprained his ankle in that game I've never seen anything like that. 23 points or 21 points in the quarter?
It was 23 or 25 points.
It was crazy. I've watched it recently again. I watched the highlights again. I'm watching him up, cringing in pain, going up and down. I mean, it's one of the greatest performances I've ever seen in NBA history. And where do you put him in those point guard talks?
To me, top 2, because every time I talk to Isaiah, we joke and I tell him, I said, listen, man, I got into so many fights over you because everybody's Jordan, and I get it. Jordan is arguably the greatest player of all time. Okay, I get it. You know, but I think his sneakers took him to another level, and even on court, Jordan is probably the top 3 greatest I've ever seen play. But with Isaiah fought wars. Isaiah, them Eastern Conference championship days with the Boston Celtics were brutal. So I going back to what I was saying earlier, I kid with Isaiah all the time. I said, man, my Jordan beef with people is just now calming down. Now I got to argue with them, talking about Steph better than me. And I'm like, you know, Steph, like you said, Steph is the greatest shooter, but overall point guard is Isaiah Lord Thomas, because he actually played defense. Steph Curry doesn't play defense. Nothing against Steph, and I know people are going to dog me for saying it, but Isaiah was the total package. He made other players around him better. Steph doesn't do that. Steph shoots. Steph makes him better. And like I said, Isaiah plays defense, and you know, he is a true leader, and just in my opinion. So I say 1-2. Of course, I'm a Magic Johnson fan by him coming from Michigan, by him being born and raised in Lansing, Michigan. 1-2 with nobody number 1. I just say is Isaiah and Magic.
I mean, it's hard to argue that, and I think with Steph, you know, I'm a big Steph fan just because I saw him play my Cavs multiple times and just destroy us. And, you know, we know what he's all about and how good he is.
Right.
And I think it's a different era too. That's the thing I think we have to, you know, say is, hey, in this era with no hand checking, and Steph's probably the best. I mean, I don't think anybody can stop Steph. He's just that. When you're that good of a shooter, Ty, and you can shoot from 40 feet away, no problem. You know, but you put him back in the old era. I'm not saying Steph couldn't survive, and a great shooter is a great shooter. But right. I had Ricky Pierce and some guys on from the old days on this podcast, and they were all telling me. I had Willie Burton from Michigan, Michigan boy. Yeah. Willie's a great guy, and they're telling me, Willie's like, look, man, you put you put the 2017 Warriors and the 96 Bulls. Okay, he said if you play with the 96 rules, Jordan's winning that all day long.
Of course,
you put it in the 2017 rules. Yeah, the Warriors are going to win because you can't hand check them. You can't. He was coming off a screen in the 90s and the 80s. People be bumping you. You know, every time you came off a screen, they're hitting you in the chest. You're not doing that now as much. You know, and hardly at all. So he was Willie told me he had a 51 or 53 point game in Philly back in the 90s. And he said, Brad, after that game, I was so exhausted from from getting hit and pounded. I can't imagine how Jordan did it every 3 games. He was putting up 40 or 50, some crazy stat. That's how good that guy was. But he was just, and Isaiah, when you go back to those wars, I mean, if for you young kids watching out there, go back and just look at the YouTube highlights of Isaiah versus the Celtics or the Barkley Sixers or the Cavs or the Bulls or whoever they're facing. I mean, you want to talk about brutal. I mean, guys throwing each other down, hitting each other, elbowing each other. I mean, bloody noses. It was like football almost. It really was.
I think Karl Malone gave him like 10 stitches across the
phone. Karl Malone. Yep, exactly. Yep.
And even playing teams like the Milwaukee Bucks with Terry Cummings and them. It was like that. It was brutal basketball in those days. And I miss it. I really do, because now, once again, it seems like basketball has become more corporate now. Everything is just, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. Oh, that's illegal. You know, you can't foul too hard and all that. Like, I think really, really in this era, if Isaiah was playing in this era, he would be so dominant.
I think
you know, so
I can't argue that one bit. I think a lot of those guys would be. And again, I'm not disrespecting. There's still, I think the shooting today, the outside shooting today, I've never seen anything like it. It's incredible. But as far as just all around players, the mid range game, guys who can do it all, you had to be able to do it all back then. You couldn't play defense in the 80s. You weren't going to survive because people would just eat you up. So unless you were an incredible offensive player. So, and again, Ricky Pierce played on those Bucks teams, and he was telling me he played with Cummings and, all those guys. They had some great teams in Milwaukee that people forget about. And he was the same thing. He said, look, going against Jordan, those guys, like, every game was a battle. At any team you faced in the East, they all had great players. They all were loaded. They all were tough, so there wasn't any nights off necessarily. So, yeah, it was just a different era, and then, again, I'm not trying to disrespect the current era. I still watch it. I love it. I'll always love, but just very different in how it's just like the quarterbacks today in the NFL, very different. The rules are different. So you can get away with a lot more. You can do a lot more. So it is what it is. But I wanted to ask you about Isaiah because I've always thought he's one of the more underrated players in NBA history. I think him and guys like Dream and some of the guys back in that era, I don't think people understand how great they really were. These guys, you could put Dream and Isaiah and guys like that in any era and they would dominate. They're that good.
Yeah. Isaiah, especially with Hakeem, Hakeem really don't get the credit that he really deserves. When they talk about centers, they always talk about Wilt, Russell, and Shaq.
Yep.
And then Kareem. Then that's where it stopped. But I'm like, well, hold on. Last time I checked, Hakeem beat Shaq in the finals.
Yep.
Murderized him. So it's like
4-0. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And Ty, even Shaq says that. Shaq will say, look, he's the one guy I couldn't get past him. He was just in his prime. It's not like Shaq wasn't physically dominant. We know he could dominate anybody physically, but on the defensive end, I had no answer for Dream. How are you going to stop that? How are you going to stop a guy who has point guard moves and basically a 7-foot body? You can't stop that.
Yeah. And I think too, to Isaiah's point too, maybe, even though Detroit is a big city, but it was a small market back in those days for basketball, just like in sports general, just like Cleveland. We are always the underdogs.
Yes.
Whatever. Maybe it's a Midwest thing. I don't know, because everybody loves East Coast or West Coast or South, but it seemed like Midwest teams pretty much get the short end of the stick when it comes like to marketing and all that. Like, to me, the 04 Pistons is probably the greatest 5 players ever assembled besides the Bulls.
I was going to ask you about that. If that 04 team, because that's one of the more fascinating teams in NBA history that never gets talked about. You got 5 all-star caliber players in one lineup, and people forget how great Tayshaun was. They kind of write him off. He was a great player. That block he made in that game against Indiana, I'll never forget that. I was in college then. All my buddies were watching it.
Yeah.
So you guys, okay, first question about those two teams, the Bad Boy Pistons and the 04 Pistons. Who would win between those two teams if they face each other?
You know what?
I'm putting you on the spot here.
Because I get asked it all the time, and I tell the same answer. I would just sit back and enjoy it, because it's pretty much 2 different levels of basketball. Now, the 04 team can get the Bad Boys just because of their stamina, the starting 5, but the Bad Boys had a great bench too. The next 5 come off the bench from the Bad Boys could easily beat the 04 team themselves. You had Sally, you had Vinnie Johnson, you had all these guys coming off the bench for the Pistons, but then, the 04 team was just put it like this. The 04 team is a Heiberg version of the Bad Boys, because even with Wallace and Rasheed Wallace and Ben Wallace, you still had that toughness bad boy thing. Chauncey and Rip played defense. Tayshaun played defense. So to see Tayshaun and Robin go at it would have been something.
It would have.
Yeah, or even Robin and Ben Wallace. And Isaiah and Chauncey.
Oh, I would love these matchups to be incredible.
Rip and Dumars. So it's kind of like,
And these are guys that wouldn't back down from each other either. They both go. They all go at each other.
Not at all. So we've been blessed here to have basketball. Hopefully, it's coming back again with Cade. Yep. I see spurts with Cade. And hold on one second. Okay, sorry about that.
Perfect. No, it's
Can you
okay.
hear me?
Yep, you're
Yep.
good.
So I see spurts of that with Cade and Sadiq Bey and people like that. So hopefully we're turning that corner a little bit.
Well, I can
You
tell
know,
you here in Cleveland, we after last year, I mean, basketball was hardly even talked about here. People were so down on the Cavs after the
yeah,
finish last year, and then all of a sudden, we trade for Jared Allen. We had him in last year, but end of the or middle of the season, and all of a sudden he's panning out. And then Darius Garland's taking his game to a new level, and then we get this kid Evan Mobley, number 3 overall, and this kid is phenomenal. I mean, he is one of the most talented young guys I've ever seen. He's 20 years old, and he can do it both ways. He's a defensive monster and he's an offensive guy. But what I'm telling you guys, Detroit fans, like you never know when you're going to turn that corner. Because we thought we were
no,
dead and gone, and all of a sudden
no,
this year we can make the play. We're going to make the playoffs likely unless we get injured. We have a lot of injuries right now. But so all this talent they put together over a period of years for the Cavs, it was kind of like, okay, they don't mesh that well. How's this going to work? Everyone was kind of down on them in Cleveland. Now they're the talk of the town. They're bigger than the Browns, and the Browns are
yeah,
football's heaven here. Everyone talks football here. The Cavs are just as big right now as the Browns. It's incredible.
yeah, because the Cavs are probably the most surprising team in the NBA right
No
now.
question about it. Maybe in sports right now, because
Oh,
everyone thought they could be tie. Everyone thought they'd be last place. They'd be terrible. So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
why
And,
no, go on.
go
So
ahead. Yeah. So no, what I was saying, and you know what? That's good for basketball. It is, because I love when the underdogs finally come up. Like, I love the position that the Memphis Grizzlies are in.
yes,
Which John Moran is probably one of my favorite basketball players right now. I
star.
love, and it's always good when the underdogs start winning.
Well, and that's the thing with Cade and Evan Mobley. These are 2 studs now that are going to be on the Pistons and Cavs for hopefully a decade at least.
Yes,
So,
yeah,
that's going to lift both those franchises up. And the fact that the Cavs are already going there and the Pistons will eventually, once you guys get another pick or two, another, stud or two coming in there, you'll see these teams, going in that direction. That's good. Like you said, it's good for the NBA. I mean, I think watching the
it
Bucks
is.
win it last year, I love that. Well, that was a fun, watch. That was great for Milwaukee. I'm glad they got their title. I
I
think
love.
that's good for the NBA. I mean, no disrespect to the Lakers and all the other teams, but I just get
No,
sick of the same old teams. It's like,
yeah,
like I want
yeah.
to see some new boys in there.
Been there, done that. I love to
Been there,
see that.
done that. Yep.
And I kind of believe in what Troy Weaver is doing here, the GM here at the Pistons. He's trying to build a new era of Detroit basketball, and last year they made some sleeper picks with Sadiq Bey and Isaiah Stewart that planned out to be pretty good for us. And now you got Cade, and maybe next year we'll have a top 5 pick. So, hopefully the nucleus of this will stick around for a while,
Yep.
because now we live in an era of basketball where 3 and out, almost 2 and out. I just want to see core teams like in the 80s and in the 90s where people didn't jump ship. You stuck to your team, you re-signed with your team, and you stuck it out.
Yes, 100%. And that's what we're hoping here in Cleveland. That's why they locked up their coach, JB, who's done a fantastic job this year, Bickerstaff, and the
Yeah.
GM, Kobe Altman. And now, they're locking up guys long term and try to create a culture so these guys aren't leaving in 3 or 5 years. They want to keep it. So hopefully we'll see how that pans out. But I think Detroit, I'm sure they're trying to think of the same thing as, look, if you have a good culture and you're winning, it's going to be hard for a player to leave, especially when he's making more, he can make more money on that contract.
Of course.
I mean, unless you're LeBron, you're going to make mega money going somewhere else just because you're LeBron and you can all the endorsements. It does pay sometimes to stay with the same team. Look at Duncan. I mean, Duncan made a whole career in San Antonio. It's not like San Antonio was a giant market for basketball, before he came. I mean, Robinson, yeah, but I mean, it wasn't like a giant sports market. And they're a dynasty. They'll always be known as one of the greatest basketball dynasties. So I hope that happens for both Detroit and Cleveland. And I want to take it to fashion now. So when did you, Ty, get into fashion, and was it something you got into as a little kid? And who were your favorite fashion designers when it came to sports or just in general?
Well, yeah, it started when I was a kid, because I used to have a fetish for sneakers, for gym shoes, and I used to always draw sneakers. I remember 5 or 6 years old. 2 things I've always done is read the sports section, and I would draw sneakers. And I was always fascinated by 80s and 90s basketball sneakers, because to me, even to this day, those are some of the greatest sneakers ever created. And case in point in general is that some of these luxury design companies like Gucci, Louis Vuitton are pretty much knocking off the 80s and 90s version of these sneakers. So it started off young with me with that. And I've always had a love for sports. So I would always try to design sports jackets on my own. And then when Starter came around, Starter was around, because Starter came out in 71. But when I was old enough to actually buy starter jackets, I used to think that that was a sense of accomplishment because, you know, it's not like back in the early 80s, we had social media. So the only time we would see ads were either doing basketball games, and it wasn't a basketball game on every night unless it was your local market. So you have to wait and watch basketball games on CBS, and then you would see the starter commercial, you would see the Converse weapon commercial, you would see the different commercials. So I just fell in love with that and was wondering, you know, if I was ever to design any type of apparel, how would it look? Where would I put that there? And things like that. So it started me when I was like 5 or 6 years old.
Wow, you were young.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
that's incredible because I mean, when it comes to design in general, it's like anything. I look at it like music, for example, for musical artists. So if you're talking Elvis or the Beatles or Pac or Biggie, whoever, do you think how much of it is just natural talent that you're born with, and how much of it is hard work and putting in the effort?
I would say maybe 70% of, well, no, I would say 60-40, if not 50-50, because you still got to do the research and you still got to be some type of fan. So like whenever I create any piece, I try to bring an emotion out. Like if I would get emotional about it, because we all know that, like myself, I may have, let's just take the Detroit Lions. Let's just take that in general. So I may have 30 to 35 different sweatshirts or hoodies or hats. I probably got 40 hats, just hats.
Wow.
And so I just switch up. But you also got that one guy that been wearing the same sweatshirt for 20 years to the game. It's that one guy. Size too small. It may be that starter jacket he had when he was young, but he's still wearing it. And you know, it's just something that you take pride in, because you have to know a little bit about sports. Because if you want to tell a story, and like I tell people all the time, like, you know, you got sports writers, you got artists, you got people that tells their story through pen and paper. Me, I try to tell my story through needle and thread and stitching. So when I create something like back here, the 2004 NBA Finals jacket, or even over there, you got the 1989 Bad Boys warm-up jacket that I converted into a jacket. So when people saw that, it brought back a lot of memories. And so my thing is this: whenever I create something, I wanna give people goosebumps. I want them to be like, wow. I want it to become like a barbershop conversation piece, because some of the best conversations ever on sports is in the barbershop. Really, the best conversation on any topic, but mainly sports, is inside of a barbershop.
Just watch Coming to America. Yep, the original.
Yeah.
Yep.
Speaking of that, I was a part of a design team that had creative control over doing the whole Coming to America pack a couple years ago. When
Really?
it was the anniversary. And you saw them standing outside, and it was the New York Mets jacket, and it was the New York Jets jacket, and we created that with Starter again.
Really?
So yeah. So
No
it's a lot of
kidding.
stuff. You know, like 5 years ago, I did the Axel Foley jacket again with Starter, and
Wow.
it was and so we got plans to do that again this year too, because now it's the 35th anniversary of the Beverly Hills. So
no kidding. That's really cool. Those are a classic movie. I grew up with that stuff, so that's wow, that's really cool.
And even in your area, I always wanted to redo the Starter ad with Bernie Kosar.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't understand too. Starter had an ad when Bill Belichick was the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, and it was that zip hoodie.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah. So it's like things like that. See how you smile like that?
I'm telling you, man. If you created that, people in Cleveland would buy it. I'm telling you right now. People are.
Well, you know what?
Oh, I know they would.
It's in the works. You know, that's another thing we got to talk about too, is that dealing with sports license is harder than dealing if I wanted to go create a sneaker with Adidas or Nike and all that, because it's so many people hands in the pot. So let's just say, and then people always wonder why sports license stuff costs so much. You know, like you got an authentic jersey that's maybe $350, $325, $300. But they don't understand that okay, let's just say a Cleveland Browns jersey. Let's just say, I'm sorry to bring this guy up to you guys, Baker Mayfield. So let's say his jersey. Okay, first of all, Nike has to get paid for it. The NFL Players Union have to get paid for it. Baker Mayfield has to get paid for it. And then the actual team gets a cut off of that. So you got almost 4 to 5 people with the pots, with their hands in the pot before it even comes to retail. And let's just say this. Let's just say we want to fashionize it and add different colors to it. You still got to wait for the team to approve it and the NFL to approve it.
That's
so it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. So when it comes to sports and fashion, it's a lot, you know.
And Ty, how do you get through all that? I mean, how do you like, when do you know if something's worth it or not?
The story behind it. Story behind it. Like I, if whenever I do a Lions jacket, I'm not just going to do a basic Lion jacket, because I know it's like, okay, yeah, they can get this from Fanatics, they can get this and all that. So if I do a jacket, I would tell a story like, with us, every year we host Thanksgiving Day game.
Yep.
So I put a Thanksgiving game patch on there. Or I would do like the Axel Foley, or I would do something with the 91 NFL draft with Barry Sanders with the patch on there. So I would do something like that, like with the Pistons. If I'm not celebrating the championship or things like that, or if it's not a special event, like let's just say the day that they retired Isaiah jersey. So I would do a Piston jacket like that. On the inside, it'd be the banner of Isaiah's picture. I mean, a patch of Isaiah's banner in there. So it would have to be something creative that would bring the emotion out.
Okay.
Yeah. Other than that, it just falls in line with every other licensed sweatshirt or hat or whatever.
That's just a lot of layers you got to go through. It's a
lot, but it's worth it, because when you wear it, you get the stares, and you get the people like, oh my God, what is this? Where did you get this from? Once you get that, then you know all that waiting was in vain. Like now I'm working on 2024 stuff.
Wow.
Because
really?
I have that long just to get approval and things like that.
Wow. And Ty, what, has there ever been, I'm sure there has been, but like when you create something, do you kind of have an intuition knowing that this thing's going to sell, that, I know this thing's going to sell a lot, or this, okay. There's gotta be a couple of things you created in the past where you're like, I know for a fact this is going to be big.
Oh yeah. Like the Beverly Hills Cop jacket. The things we did last year, like when I did the Black History Month collection, which we launched in the next campaign for it in a couple of weeks. Like when I saw it and when I did it, and when the finished product came out, you just got that, wow. I got goosebumps from it. And I was like, oh, we got a problem here. We clearly did not make enough. And then once I started giving it product placement to the people I know, and once entertainers and celebrities and athletes started wearing it, it just spread like wildfire. And that's the thing too. So with me, I come from the inner city. So I come from an urban area, and I have this background in knowing a lot about sports. So 9 times out of 10, you got your fans, and you just got people that want to rep their city. So what I do, I bring the market together, and I have people that, just like, I'm quite sure if I go to Cleveland, I'm gonna see a lot of people repping the Cleveland Browns, not because they may like the Cleveland Browns, because they're from Cleveland.
Yep.
And the same thing here. So we got guys that can't tell you a hockey player's name, but will wear the Red Wings all day long because it represents the city of Detroit. And granted, to me, the Red Wings logo is probably the greatest logo of all time in hockey, besides the Chicago Blackhawks. Really, all the original 6 logos are nice.
You're right.
But it's just something about the Red Wings logo that stands out. And I'm blessed to have captured an audience of the fan, and just as a person that want to rep the city of Detroit, because, still it's nothing like putting on a brand new navy blue Old English D. And guys can't tell you 5 Tiger players. They just know it represents Detroit.
It's interesting you say that, because you're right. In Cleveland, you'll have a lot of people wear the Block C Cleveland hat. It's an old Indians, and like they're not all huge Indians or Guardians fans necessarily, but it's just the Block C. It stands for Cleveland, and people, I saw that in LA. I saw people wearing some of that. So it's interesting that you're right. You do have people who just wear sports gear, not necessarily because they care a lot about the team, but it's repping the city, and or they might like the look of it, or whatever it might be. So it's interesting. I never thought of it that way, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and I think, if to be honest with you, I would say that's pretty much 60% rep in a city, 40% is fan base for my stuff.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah.
I would think it would be the opposite, but yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And when you know, a couple more things here, Ty, because I could talk to you for hours about all this stuff, but you know,
And I can continue, especially when we talk about fashion and sports. So,
oh man, I love this, and it is right up my alley. So one thing I want to tell you,
set up a part 2 for us, right?
yeah, oh, absolutely, dude, for
Got
sure. Like, okay,
Got
okay. So when I was a little kid, my brother was a pretty good high school basketball player. He actually played, so he was one of the higher ranked players in the state of Ohio back in the early '90s. Played against the Fab Five. He was in class of '91. So my brother played against the Fab Five. You know, Jim, all those guys, knew all those guys. There's a guy. Let's put it this way: sports is a huge part of my life when I grew up, just because of my dad, my brother. So I began collecting NBA jerseys at like 7, 8 years old. I have every single '90s team, every '90s jersey you can imagine. I have every team. I think I might be missing one, but I have every single, you know, from like 1994 to '98. I have every team's jersey, every one of them. So I think I have.
Do you have the starting 5 for the Cavs?
I don't have all the. No, I don't have every player. I just have every logo, every jersey design. So
Okay,
you know.
So for the Cavs, who do you have?
I have Price, and I have I think I have a big Z, you know, Zydrunas Ilgauskas. I have two Price. I have the old Price with the cat, like the old '80s logo with the Cavs.
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about, the ball, yeah, up here. And then I have the new, that, remember the one with like the swishy, like the blue. You would know it. It's like a lot of people hated it. I liked it. I have that Price jersey, and then I have a Zydrunas Ilgauskas jersey. Of course, I have a ton of LeBrons. You know, in these days, I have like 4 or 5 authentic LeBrons. I just have an Evan Mobley jersey I bought for the new one. But for back then, 2 Price, a Z, and maybe I don't have a Kemp, because Kemp was here for a little bit. That was a pretty big seller. Yeah, that was a big selling jersey. Trying to think if I have a Brad Doherty. I'll have to look, but I know I have 2 Prices, because those are the first 2 I got. And then I have like an old Clyde Drexler Blazers. I have a guy named Blue Edwards who played for the original Vancouver Grizzlies. I have, I think I have Dumars for, I don't know why I don't have Isaiah. Do I have Isaiah? I think I have Dumars for the Pistons back in the early '90s. And then I have then I had the classic Grant Hill, you know, mid '90s, that new one. It was actually a jersey you can flip inside out. One of them was that bluish color it was, and then the other one is white.
Yeah.
And that jersey was a crazy, that was a cool jersey. I mean, a lot of people hated and loved it. I loved it. I thought it was great.
You know what? Fan-wise, people hate it in Detroit.
Yeah, I wonder why. It was a big selling jersey.
Because it was an era of Detroit basketball that wasn't very good.
Okay. That makes sense.
You know, even though Grant took us to a couple playoffs, it still wasn't good basketball.
Okay.
And you got to remember, you're coming off the iconic basketball logo.
You're right.
You back-to-back championships. You're coming off 3 straight NBA finals. We really should have 3-peated.
You're right. I agree with that.
88 should have been our year too. So you're coming off of that, and then I get it. You're trying to bring in a new era of basketball with Grant Hill, so you kind of want to bring in a new logo, new uniform. And so when Grant didn't want to be here no more, it left a lot of bad, you know, taste in people's mouths. So everybody's like, man, forget that. But fashion-wise, it's probably top 5 sellers.
It has to be. I mean, it's one of the most iconic '90s jerseys. You know, right up there with some of the Sonics jerseys. And yep.
I want to show you something, and I'm glad you brought that up. So this is a jacket I actually did with Grant Hill and with Fila. So
oh, no kidding. Yeah, yep. That's awesome.
So Grant signed it, and that's a jacket I did with the Filas. I did the custom made Filas. So, and that's us holding it up. So with that,
that's a cool jacket.
Yeah. So some people like artists frame their records, get their records framed. I frame the work that I do. So, you know, even when we go over here, so you got the 04 championship here, and it's signed by all 5, by the starting 5.
No kidding. That is cool.
And then you got over here, you got the Isaiah shooting jacket, and of course Isaiah signed it.
God.
Yep. So these are all the ones that I did.
You have no idea. This is like heaven to me, Ty, looking at this stuff.
Oh, you know what? That's my thing. So, you know, what I try to do is create memories and moments. And because like being in the Midwest and being in small markets, we don't have a lot of memories. We don't have a lot of moments. Like I'm trying to get ready for All-Star Weekend now, and I was about to pack my black bread fours, and I was like, I can't take these to Cleveland because these are the ones MJ hit the shot in.
You're right.
You know,
That wouldn't go over well. No, you're right.
Yeah, I said, it's certain things, but you know, so going back to the initial question about the teal and maroon, that's still fashionable, probably the best-selling Piston logo ever.
It's I had a guy in this podcast. His name is Mike Spitz. He owns Mr. Throwback in New York City.
Yeah. That's my guy.
Yeah. Love
guy.
Mike. Yep. So, and he was talking about some of the jerseys, and of course, he sells a ton of NBA jerseys, and he was talking about that and other ones. It was really interesting to hear his take on which jerseys sell a lot and which don't. And of course, that Pistons jersey was one of them. The Sonics. There's 4 or 5 other ones in the '90s that just sell like like hotcakes.
I'm quite sure that Alex English Denver Nuggets jersey.
Oh, those old school '80s Nuggets jersey with those are another one. And then of course even Dikembe and those guys wore it for a year or two, I think, early on before they changed the newer logo.
They did.
Yeah, yep. So that was I forgot about that. That's a great one back then.
Oh yeah, and going back to what you said earlier, the Washington Bullets jerseys.
Washington Bullets jerseys. Oh, I love those.
Hands for the L's.
Yes, that when Manute Bol and those guys and Michael Adams, those guys are playing there, and then you had the Atlanta Hawks '80s jerseys with Neek and Willis. Yeah. I mean, there's so many the '80s, '90s jerseys to me. And I know I'm old school, I'm sentimental, but I think those are just classics.
Oh, they are.
And those old Milwaukee Bucks jerseys with all the different color greens, and I love them. Those just, and I think I have an old who do I have from? I have a Milwaukee. I don't know if it was Vin Baker. I have to look who I have from Milwaukee, but whose jersey I have. But I know I have one of those mid '90s Bucks jerseys. But yeah, if I'll have to show you sometime. But I have literally, I think 78 jerseys from the '90s. No joke. All in that era. And then I also have some NFL, NHL, and MLB jerseys. So I have well over 100 jerseys. Of course, a ton of Cleveland ones too. But out of those 78, there's probably only 4 or 5 Cleveland. It's most of them is just, it was very diverse. And
where I stay is like, I wear everybody, even though I bleed Detroit, but I still put on everybody's jersey. Like I still have a Bernie Kosar Cleveland Brown jersey.
Really? That's cool.
Yeah, I still have that. I mean, it's just something about us Midwesterns. Like we'll battle it out, but we still have a soft spot for the other Midwest teams. Like,
yes,
I like Go Bears. I like, teams like that, and yeah, so it's just shows that you're a real sports fan, because I'm a homer, but I enjoy all the other sports too.
Yes, I'm the same way, Ty.
And going back to what you were saying, even when you was talking about the Fab Five just now, one of my best friends in this world is Jalen Rose. So, him talk all the time, and he has been influential in helping me brand a lot of my stuff too, by wearing it on his show, or just, me and him was sitting courtside at the Piston game a couple weeks ago. And like I said, we grew up together. I went to the same high school together. We went to the great Detroit Southwestern High School.
Oh, I didn't know that. No kidding.
Oh yeah. Went to high school together. And that high school team at Detroit Southwestern, that '90 team, is probably one of the greatest high school basketball teams ever assembled, because we had 3 guys that went to the NBA on that one team. You had Jalen Rose, Voshan Leonard.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Voshan. Yep.
And then Howard Isley.
Wow, and Isley. Yeah, I had a guy in the podcast who played against Isley at Boston College, because Isley went to Boston College, and then I had Dana Barros on, and Dana went to Boston College, so he played against him. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. No, I forgot that Isley was from Detroit.
Oh yeah. So going back to those days, like, it would just be something to go to a Southwestern basketball game, because basketball, the ticket was only like $5. So it was must see basketball, because it was no telling what college coach you was going to see there. So at any given moment, you'll see Sisetsky, you'll see Dean Smith, you'll see John Thompson, you see Jerry Tarkanian. So you'll see Roy Williams, you'll see Larry Brown, you'll see everybody, John
Chaney.
John Chaney.
Yep.
So you'll see everybody there. So we would take the $5 tickets and go out and sell them for $20, $25, because the games will sell out. And so that's what we'll do. So when you were saying that about the Cleveland Indians Chicago Cub thing, I can relate to that, because we didn't make that much of a profit, but we would take $5 tickets and sell them for $20, because people would come in to see, that game.
That's funny.
And I was there, and I witnessed the whole Fab Five thing.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because my brother was class of '91, same class. And
Right.
he was one of the top, players not, in the state of Ohio and in the nation. He was a
Right.
great player, 31 points a game, led Cleveland in scoring, led the city of Cleveland in scoring. So, and I remember he kept telling me, man, Chris Webber, Jalen Rose, Juwan Howard, Jimmy King, Ray Jackson. And I was probably 8, 9, 10 years. I was young kid, but I remember hearing those names over and over and watching the first Fab Five games and the black socks and the baggy shorts. And like, for me, that's my generation style. Like we all started wearing that stuff in the mid 90s because of the Fab Five. And there was the documentary they put out probably 10, 12 years ago about the Fab Five.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
phenomenal. I think it was a 30 for 30 or something on ESPN. And it was phenomenal. And all my friends watched it. We're all like, man, I forgot. They said, and I want to have you comment on this, but they said the day after they wore those black socks, every black sock in America was sold out the next day from stores.
It was.
That's like crazy. So give me your take on the Fab Five and the fashion that they.
Well, to be honest with you, Jalen was the ringleader and all that. Now, going back to the black sock thing, that was a Ray Jackson thing because they wanted to be different. So they was playing a game and Ray had somebody go get some black socks. Like they just wanted to be something different. So at that time, they only had like, I think a couple pair of black socks around. So they did that. And if you notice, Jalen actually put on black dress socks.
Really?
Over his white socks. Yeah. For the first game, Jalen didn't have any black socks. So it was dress socks over the other socks. And then it just spread it like wildfire, where to the point where Nike could not keep any black Nike socks in stock. They became the Fab Five stock, like with the sneakers, with the Air Maxes and with the Huaraches and all that. Really, the Huarache is not a basketball shoe at all. But they saw the fashion in it and they wanted to be different. And if you look at it, they was really the first college team and really professional team really to not wear team colored shoes, because that Huarache was white, black, and purple. And we all know Michigan has the greatest colors, that maize and blue. So that didn't, I just had to throw that jab.
I know you did. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, for our fashion point of view, they set the trend because they came in an age where hip hop really was catching on, and hip hop was here already, but the fashion part of hip hop really caught fire in the early 90s. So, they are a staple. And Jalen said something one day that made a lot of sense. And he said, we may not have never won a title, but all 5 of our names, and you can't even name the starting 5 of the 2 teams that beat us.
That's true. That's a great statement. It's absolutely true. You could tell, Jalen, my generation, and I'm 38 now, I was probably 9, 10, 11 years old then. That was iconic for us. For everybody, but for our generation, that was truly iconic. And we dressed like them. We wore the black socks. We wore the baggy shorts. And I remember in like 6th grade, some of my friends asking for baggier shorts when they had these tight little shorts they would give us for like basketball, for our grade school team. We wanted the bigger shorts. So that was all because of the Fab Five. And they literally changed. It was, and then of course, you're right. Hip hop and grunge were big at that time. And those 2 fashions that was the youth of America was either the grunge or the hip hop. So for me, when I was, Dre was coming up and Snoop, and that was, the Chronic was 92 and all that. So that was my era of growing up. And I remember all that like it was yesterday. And it's funny, I had a referee on here named Phil Bova. He was a ref in the Big Ten for 35 years, Ty. And your camera went up, by the way. There we go.
Go ahead.
So Phil was a referee for 35 years. And he was actually the guy. Remember when Bobby Knight threw that chair?
Yeah.
That was Phil Bova. He was one of those 2 refs reffing that night where Bobby Knight. So Phil's good friends with Bobby, and he's a great guy. And he's a legend in the Big Ten. He reffed all those games. He actually reffed the first ever Fab Five game at Notre Dame. So that would have been, it was 91. I think it was like, November 91. Yep. He said, I reffed the first ever Fab Five game. So I have him. I remember, I don't know what he said, but I asked him, do you know how great they were going to be? And I can't remember what he said, but he said it was definitely fun to do that. Because he used to ref a lot of Michigan games. He'd drive up. He's from Ohio, and he'd drive a couple hours. But I think that was at Notre Dame, I believe, the first one. So, yeah, it was really interesting. So it was really cool. The Fab Five, again, with my life, between my brother playing basketball and knowing Phil, the referee, and all, they have a lot of, and then, of course, Ohio State-Michigan rivalry. The Fab Five means a lot to me, even though I'm an Ohio State guy, but I appreciate what they did. They were trendsetters.
Yeah. And I remember 90 the Final Four in 93. They had to lock down they put them, I think it was on like the 12th or 13th floor at the hotel they was in. And they couldn't rent any rooms from the 8th floor onto the 12th floor because that's how much security they demanded. It was like rock stars.
Crazy.
And I've never like this. And to be honest with you, it's like they were at one point in time, they probably made it look easy on camera, but they were still in awe and shock of themselves anyway. And these are still young kids. And people are making so much money off of them. And it's funny because I remember Jalen telling the story that, you know, they played in a tournament in Chicago and they went to Nike Town. And in the window, it says Fab 5 Huarache, the shoe. So I'm personally glad to see these collegiate kids finally can make some money off of their likeness and images, because the University of Michigan made so much money in those 2.5 years off them boys. Whether it was sales, whether it was Black Sox sales, enrollment in school, because everybody wanted to go to Michigan. So they had people that enrolled in Michigan that wanted to go there because they wanted to be with the Fab Five. And it was nothing like it. And that was a good time for us here in Detroit and in Michigan, because you got to remember, we got the 87 Eastern Conference Final. We lost to Boston. We finally got over the hump, beat Boston in 88 to play the Lakers, supposed to win the championship there. Then you got the back-to-back titles, 89 and 90. So we had like a year break, and then the Fab Five came for those 3 years. So in that 5 or 6 year span of basketball, the whole world was paying attention to us when it came to basketball.
That's crazy. I never thought of that. How it was it? You're right. Yeah, you guys were the center of the universe. And even the year that, even 91 losing to the Bulls, that was still a memorable series. Everyone remembers, you know, the whole, everything that happened. And that was, that was, you know, but it was, you guys were certainly, yeah, for 5-6 years, you guys were part of, and it's a shame that I know, I completely understand why Chris went to the NBA early and Jalen and those guys. I get it. I totally do. But it's a shame we couldn't see them for 4 years straight, because you know they would have won at least one in those next couple of years.
And I think that really started the trend of guys leaving early, because another a great friend of mine and a mentor of mine is Derek Coleman. And you know, people didn't understand he stayed his whole allotment of Syracuse, you know, and you got people like Grant Hill. He stayed his whole 3 years. He stayed 3 years at Duke. So it's like you got these players that were staying 3 and 4 years and all that. Now you got the one and dones or the two and outs and all that. So you really can't really build any more college basketball rivalries anymore. It's like nothing there. It's like, you know, you got hubs like Kentucky and Duke, well, you know, they're just going to be there for 1 year and they're gone.
Yep. Ty, I said that for years now about college basketball. And first of all, shout out to DC. What a great player he was, and a guy that really kind of transcended the power forward position. But
the stretch.
Oh, he was fantastic. And as a shame what happened, I had Kenny Anderson on this podcast. And Kenny, we talked about Drazen Petrovic, and, you know, if he wouldn't have passed away, I mean, they would have been a force. They were a force even without him for a couple of years. But with him, they would have been a real force, because he was, I mean, Drazen was going to be, I mean, I've never seen anybody like him, you know, at that point. He was really like a Steph Curry back then. He could just hit, you know, he had the quickest release, Reggie Miller said, he's ever seen in a player. And I think he put up like 40 against Jordan one time, and he was a beast. Then you had DC and Kenny. Like, man, that was a team. And Chris Morris. Yep. No, they had a squad. There was no doubt about it.
And in the talk with your 90s collection, do you have a tie-dye New Jersey Nets jersey?
No, I got to get one. Oh, it's funny. I talked to Mike at Throwback, and I said, I want to get a early 90s Drazen Petrovic throwback jersey. You know, I need to get that.
Gotta be tie-dye.
Definitely a tie-dye, for sure. That was a classic one. Absolutely. I'm glad they brought those back with the current Nets, because I know they brought them back, you know, I saw Kyrie and those guys wearing it. And I love that jersey. It's just a classic jersey. But, you know, DC, he was, again, a guy that really transcended the power forward position. And we didn't, you know, now guys obviously play more outside, and they're a little more versatile at the power forward position. But back then it wasn't really like that. You had, you know, guys like Kevin McHale and the bruisers underneath you stayed underneath. You didn't come out. So, you know, DC he was a heck of a player. But yeah, I think, you know, when it came to the Fab Five in general, when I look back at them, Ty, you know, it was just a team that, even though they only played together for 2 years, you know, the full team, I mean, you said the trends they set, the fashion statements, everything, the hip hop, you know, they had an aura to them too, and they had a swag to them that you just didn't see with many teams in any sport. So, and I feel another guy in Detroit that had that swag. He didn't have the swag necessarily. He was kind of a quiet guy, but on the field was Barry Sanders. With Barry Sanders, I mean, he was my favorite football player, still is, of all time. I love Barry. I grew up watching him. I still think, and we're Cleveland, so we're Jim Brown people, and but
Of course,
we can
of course.
debate that all day long. But to me, it's hard to see those two. To me, I'll take Jim Brown and Barry Sanders over anybody when it comes to when you look at the physicality, and then you look at Barry. I mean, how big his calves were, and how that dude was a freak. And watching
He
him,
was very short.
I
He
mean,
was very short. He
I-
was short, stubby.
exactly, he was short and stubby. And I remember I think it was either Lawyer Malloy or Ty Law in the Patriots. That one where he was behind and running, and he was going like, yeah. I mean, it's just, again, I think Barry, at least I can't speak on Jim Brown because I wasn't alive during the 60s. That
Right.
era will tell you he was the best. But as far as post like 1985, I've never seen anybody like Barry. I mean, he was phenomenal. I think he's the best running back I've seen in my lifetime. And it's a shame that between Megatron and Barry, you guys never. I mean, you could argue those are two of the greatest at their position of all time, and they never won anything because I mean, we'll get into that, but it's just how does Detroit look at Megatron and Barry, and is Barry still the legend he was back in the 90s in Detroit?
Barry's God here. Barry, the Mount Rushmore always will be Barry, Isaiah. It would be Barry, Isaiah, Steve Eiserman, and you had to bring in baseball. It would probably be either Alan Trammell or Jack Morris.
Okay,
Those
really?
be the Mount Rushmores. Like Barry would never have to pay anything in the city of Detroit ever again. Anything. And we appreciated Barry and CJ, but our teams never were good enough to get them to the plateau where they deserve to be at. Like, Barry went to a couple of playoff games, and ironically enough, this is the 30th anniversary of the last playoff victory the Lions have had.
Wow.
Especially home. So in my lifetime, I just turned 50 a couple of weeks ago, and in my 50 years, I've only seen one Lions playoff home game.
Wow.
And that was in 1992. And when you think about Barry Sanders, think about this. No other NFL running back has ever ran backwards, has ever ran for negative yards to gain positive yards ever, like Barry Sanders did. You would see Barry Sanders run 5 or 10 yards back to juke 3 people just to go gain 2 yards.
Right.
To get back to the line of scrimmage and gain 2 yards. And no wide receiver has ever taken the punishment that Megatron has taken. You would have people triple team him. You would have 4 people, and he would still be in the end zone and still catching touchdowns over 3 and 4 people. And when they hit him, they had to hit him hard because Calvin is just this. That was the perfect name for him, was Megatron, because he's built like a robot.
Yep.
Yeah. So watching them was a privilege, and even getting to know Calvin on a personal level and becoming friends with Calvin is even something too. So, I've been blessed that I've gained relationships with a lot of these players. So
I'll tell you what, for a smaller market, Detroit's had some just phenomenal. I mean, look at the last 30 years, like we talked about Isaiah, Barry, Megatron. You guys, these aren't just like good midway guys in that only Detroit would know. These are guys who are superstars, really. Hall of Famers, no question about it, and would have been bigger, especially not Isaiah, but when it comes to Barry and Megatron, would have been bigger if the Lions had been better. If they won the Super Bowls, you would, everyone would be talking about Megatron and Barry Sanders, and it's a shame they weren't able to showcase themselves, deep in the playoffs.
Well, we've seen it now with Matt Stafford.
There you go. And I was going to ask you about Stafford. If are Detroit, are you guys happy for him? Are you guys jealous?
Yeah.
Like what?
I mean, no, it was to the point where he wanted to leave, and he wanted to go fulfill that dream, and he knew it wasn't going to happen here. So it's like I'm happy for him. I want to see him win the Super Bowl. I do. It's just like if Calvin or Isaiah would have went to another team, I still would have rooted for them, because I think people don't hate Matthew Stafford because of all of the charity stuff he still does here in the city of Detroit. He still contributes a lot of money here. So it's like he never forgot about Detroit, even though he left with a professional, but he always, his roots is here. So, hopefully he do win a Super Bowl, because that will probably be the closest we'll ever get to seeing a Super Bowl for us.
We feel you on that. Yep. Oh yeah.
Ever.
And again, it's a shame that you guys, I mean, especially the 90s. I remember you guys had like Herman Moore and Brett Perriman, and so you had some decent players, but it just, you never could get. I remember you signed Scott Mitchell because I was at the game at the old Cleveland Stadium when Dan Marino got hurt and Scott Mitchell came in. He was the backup and threw for I don't know how many yards. He was phenomenal the rest of the season. And of course, Detroit went out and signed him.
We thought that was it.
Yeah.
We thought we got our savior. Yes. We got Brett Perriman, Herman Moore. We got Johnny Morton. Okay, we got
Morton. Yep.
We got a core of receivers. Let's go. It just didn't pan out. I mean,
Yep.
I don't know. It just, this last decade has been rough on us in Detroit. I mean, we had a nice run in the early 2000s because the Pistons was good, the Tigers was good, the Wings was great. The Lions was just the Lions. So, but now it's like I'm not even gonna say it's sad. It's just that it's just a rebuilding phase, and us older fans are not used to it. Especially the Red Wings. We're not used to that. We used to be playoffs. We used to playoffs every year. We used to be in competition for the Stanley Cup trophy every year. So, right. One thing about Detroit, they are serious about their sports, and believe it or not, in my opinion, and just by seeing different fans, the Lions still rule here.
Really?
Because
interesting.
Because look, we still sell out our stadium every game.
Wow.
The Lions are the only team that sells out their stadiums in Detroit. Because it's just that passion that we just want them to win. And it's like, it's no fan like a Detroit Lion fan. And for the longest, we were bad, and then we got the 0-16 record, and I thought that was something we're gonna keep to ourselves until you guys came along. That's typical Detroit Cleveland stuff.
We had to share the spotlight. Yep.
Right. It's just like, that wasn't good enough for you guys, so you want to come steal some of that glory from us. I don't know why, but okay. So we can't claim that anymore. So I really thought we was gonna go 0-16-1 this year. I really thought it was gonna happen. I was like, okay, because anything, I guess like a Cleveland Browns fan, anything you think that not gonna happen is gonna happen to you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like, I've never seen that before. Well, just stay tuned.
Oh, trust me, we lived it here. I totally get that. Yep. And you almost laugh after a while. You're like, well, you know.
Yep. It becomes like put it like this: the last 5 years, I'm still a fan. I go to every game, but I don't have that much emotion into it no more because I didn't seen it all. So it's like, if we're up by 30 in the 2-minute warning in the fourth quarter, I'm still scared because somehow somebody's going to 35-point play on us and win the game.
Oh, I hear you. Trust me, as Browns fans, it's an inside joke. We'll text each other, me and my buddies, and we'll be up. Let's say we're up by 20 in the fourth quarter. We'll be terrified. Like, okay, so they're going to get a touchdown. They're going to get an onside kick. Because it's happened before, though. We've blown so many leads. We've messed, so the Lions and the Browns definitely have a lot in common that way. And the fan bases do. And they're great fan bases. It's a shame that we haven't, hopefully we'll both get to a Super Bowl one day. Watch us play each other one day. That'd be the irony of all ironies, wouldn't it?
Probably ending the 0-0 tie.
Seriously, yeah, it would. I don't know. That would be interesting. Like the Cubs and Indians were years back. But yeah, I've always thought it'd be funny if we played each other.
Yeah, but one thing I tell people, we own the 50, so we still got that. We go in the Ford Field. It's the banners up there that say it's not even Super Bowl, it's NFL championship.
That's what we got to. Yeah, we got the.
So we got 4 banners in the 50, so that's still a dynasty in the 50s. I didn't get to enjoy it, but somebody did.
It's funny. My dad was at the last Cleveland Browns championship in '64. It was an NFL championship, I believe they called it, and they played. Who did they play? The Colts. I think it was Johnny Unitas and those guys. And they said he was at that game, and it was funny. He's like, I never thought I'd be waiting 50 some years later to watch another one. But it just, especially back then when they had Jim Brown, they were loaded with talent back then. But so a couple more questions for you, Ty. And I want to, back to the fashion part of it. When you look, the next 10, 15 years of sports fashion, are there any trends? How long does it take for a trend to take off? Like when you, as a fashion designer, when you see a newer trend coming into play, how long does it take for the public to catch on to that trend?
Maybe 2 years, if that. Normally catch on right away. But the one thing about, and probably the best thing about sports license apparel, is that it really doesn't have to follow any trends because it's sports license. Now it's on you. Let's just say, like, I've made a hat like this before, a Bad Boys hat, and then the brim was orange basketball material. So we may do some projects like that, but all in all, we've been blessed that we don't have to set any trends or follow any trends because it's sports license stuff. Like I tell you, like I told you earlier, it's like, 60% of it's going to be people representing where they're from, or 40% is going to be more of the fan base. Now, it's the people that make it fashionable, like, let's say like some designers and all that. But like in my category, I don't have to worry about, is it trending in the fashion world, because we can make it trend ourselves. So if I wanted to do like, like what I do sometimes is, I know every December, I know Jordan is going to put out a retro 11 patent leather. So I may do a Piston jacket and a Bulls jacket trimmed in patent leather to do things like that. Or I may team up with some people and do like different skins or different materials on a jacket and all that. So we pretty much set our own trend when it comes to sports license, and we're lucky that we don't have to follow trends.
Interesting. Yeah, it's cool hearing this, because I was wondering how that plays in the sports world with fashion, because it seems like, and like when you come up with a new idea, do you know right away, like if I don't know how you do this, but like, how do you know if you came up with 3 ideas in the past month, how do you know which one you're going to go with? Is it just an intuition thing, or is it something that's, can you apply logic to it, or how do you know what to actually go after?
Sometimes it'd be intuition, but like I said before, dealing with sports license, we can pretty much pick and choose the emotion we want to drop. Like I helped consult a friend of mine that has a boutique in San Francisco called The Stash. So I helped her consult. I consulted on her with a 75th anniversary of the 49er jacket, because this was their 75th anniversary. So we did a cool jacket, and we had the different Super Bowl logos that they won on one sleeve, the 75th anniversary patch on there. And it was just by the luck of a draw that they beat Green Bay. And I said, release the jacket now so you can sell out of it. And she released it then, and she sold over 150 jackets in almost 20 minutes.
Wow.
So those are the type of things that, but once again, it's the luck of the draw. Nobody knew that the 49ers were going to upset the Packers, because she really was going to save it for Super Bowl weekend and then drop it there. But I was like, you know what? Go get the for sure money now.
Yep.
And let's drop it, because people will buy off an emotion.
100%.
And, so those are some of the things that we can do with sports license stuff. Like I said before, more stuff when it comes to us fashion and sports license is built more off an emotion and an impulse buy. So like, if, again, like how you said, if I was to drop that Bill Belichick coat that he wore in the starter ad, or even that Bernie Kosar starter jacket that was brown, that had browns going across it in orange. See, it's a memorable, what it does, it makes you want to buy it, because what it does, let's just say when we was kids, we couldn't get one. We couldn't afford it, whatever. So now we buy it. Now we feel like it's a sense of accomplishment that I finally got that one thing that always eluded me. And I always got memories with it. And that's how it is with Starter. Starter is a brand that brings out emotion, because it's been relevant for over 50 years now. So I remember the iconic Starter ad with Isaiah Thomas wearing a starter jacket with the thick turtleneck in it, the Dr. J one, all that stuff. So when you buy it now, I had a guy tell me one day, he said, man, I'm gonna buy every one you put out, because when I was young, I couldn't afford it. Now when I buy it, it just brings back a lot of memories. My dad used to always wear this one to the game. This the one, it was his favorite jacket. So, it brings like a lot of emotions.
It is all emotion. It's really, memories and emotion.
Yeah.
It's all, that's when I look at my jerseys, I still look back and it'll remind me of a certain point in my childhood. I remember wearing that jersey here, or whatever it might have been, it's just, or you remember a certain game that you watched that, this player wore that jersey. So yeah, you're right. It's all about emotion and being sentimental. I think with sports fans, it's such a big part of it. You can't really, I don't know you can't really be non-emotional, be a sports fan. You have to.
Because listen, how many pieces of the Cavs championship do you have?
Oh,
just memory.
A ton.
And that's going to last you forever.
Yep.
God forbid, whatever. How about if the Browns ever win a Super Bowl?
Oh, I don't even want to tell you. I would drop more money than I want to even admit. And I know a lot of Clevelanders would. No question about it. Yep.
But the emotion, something that's going to always, 20 years from now, you can still wear it and it still give you the goosebumps, and you still remember where you was at, when they won it.
Yep.
Me, I remember all of our sports championship. I remember when the 89 Michigan Wolverines won the national championship in basketball. I remember when the 91 Michigan Wolverines won it in football. You know, I remember the Pistons. I remember the Tigers. I remember the Red Wings. Only one missing is the Lions. I don't. So that right there, yeah. So that's it.
Okay, so one more question for you, and then we got to do this again sometime because again, I could talk to you for hours about all this stuff, man. But so I ask this to every guest, and I love hearing the answer to it. When you look back, you know, years from now, and you're on some beach with a pina colada somewhere, looking back at your career, I'm sure you'll never fully retire, but I mean, you know, if you did, what do you want the world to know about the legacy of Ty Mopkins?
That I created a back-to-back Super Bowl Detroit Lions jacket.
I love it.
Champion. We finally did it, and really, I did it the right way. I didn't shortcut anybody. I didn't cheat nobody, and everything I did was organic. And really, to the people of Detroit, just to let them know that somebody can come from the city of Detroit and make a national impact when it comes to fashion and even sports fashion. Because for so long, people categorize New York and LA as the fashion capital of the world. And that somebody from Detroit came and made their mark too. Probably wasn't the greatest, but they knew who he was. So that's why I tell people all the time, if I had to compare myself, if I had to say in basketball, who would I be? I would be Isaiah Thomas, because I came from a small market, won some championships, had some success, go down as one of the greatest, and can still come here and get a free cup of coffee.
I love
and
it.
maybe a beer.
Yeah, man, I loved your whole story, the Midwest vibe, you know, and the fact that I have ties to Detroit. It's just so cool to talk to you, man. And the fact that you design things that I love, and you're in a city that I know so much about now, and just the Midwest history and the Cleveland, Detroit stuff, and it's just the Michigan, Ohio State. There's a lot there. So it's been awesome talking to you. And I got to give you my cell phone number. I'll shoot you a message on IG. I definitely want to keep in touch with you because
we will.
I'm
I'm gonna try to link with you when I get there.
Absolutely, man.
But next time you're in Detroit, call me. I can take you out to one of our good restaurants here.
Would love to do that for sure. And again, I have a lot of different friends throughout sports as well. So we have to link up some time. And it's just so cool to talk to somebody, especially from Detroit, since I go there all the time. You know, when I started looking at your page probably over a year ago, I was like, wow, this is really neat. I didn't realize who you were at first. And I'm like, oh my God. And I saw these different things you're doing. I'm like, this is cool, man. Right up my alley. So it's cool to meet the legend of Ty, man. And it's we'll have to do this again. And again, I'll send you my number in a little bit here. So
I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Awesome. You too, Ty. Take care, man.
All right.
Thank you.
Go Lions.
Right. Yeah. Go Browns. All right, later, man.